When dogs talk, when dogs talk, when dogs talk, when dogs talk. When dogs talk, 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 when dogs talk.
Hello, and welcome to When Docs Talk. I'm so excited to be here after a hiatus. I've missed you all. I've missed our viewers. How are y'all doing today?
Doing great.
Good.
Amazing. I'm happy to be here.
I missed y'all too.
Yes. I definitely missed you. I missed talking. What I really love, though, is that in the hiatus that we've had a lot of feedback from our viewers. I thank you all who have emailed me or posted on the site asking, one, when are you all getting back? Two, what are you all going to be talking about? We want to talk with the docs. And also, I thank you all for helping us to reach over 1,000 subscribers on YouTube and over 1,500 subscribers on Facebook. Keep subscribing, liking, and sharing because we love to hear from you and we'll be able to reach out to you whenever you do so. But for those of you who are joining When Docs Talk for the first time, I want to give you just a little bit of a scoop as to who we are, what we do, and to welcome you to When Docs Talk, to this discussion. We are a collaborative of emergency practitioners. We are healthcare professionals, most of us working in emergency departments and acute care settings. We are doctors, we are nurses, we are nurse practitioners and PAs. And our guests span a whole broad range of professions. In fact, we're joined today by a few who are completely outside of medicine, but whom we thought would really contribute very well to this subject matter. So we're excited to get everyone together and talk, but I need to let you all meet our crew for those of you who haven't.
Okay. So I am Dr. Sonia Pinson, a Georgia native Navy veteran. I am a family practitioner trained in family medicine, but I'm working in an emergency urgent care setting, and very glad to be back to have some great discussions with my colleagues and friends tonight.
All right, Dr. P.
Hello, everybody. My name is Davita. I am an emergency room nurse, trauma. Yes, I am traveling at this time, I am originally from Memphis, Tennessee, but I've been in Atlanta for the last 11 years, so this is my new home. I'm very happy to be here today and to discuss the topics at hand.
All right, Ms. Davita, welcome.
And hello, guys. I am Dr. Yolanda Harrison Lloyd, also known as Dr. Yulee. I have roots reaching from rural Arkansas, Osceola, and Blytheville to be specific, and New Orleans, Louisiana. I am family medicine, also working in an urgent care setting. I am a mother of two beautiful children and wife to my wonderful husband, Justin. And I can't wait to get to that started with you guys.
All right, Dr. Yulee. And so I did a lot of talking in the beginning, and I didn't even tell you who I was. I'm Dr. Adediong Ipe Apo, known to many as Dr. Adediong, Dr. Didi, Dr. Ipe. You can call me any of those, but I'm happy to have you here. I am an emergency physician by training, also board certified in internal medicine, and I have practiced in emergency departments throughout the United States for many years now. I've also worked as a hospitalist in internal medicine. I originally hail from Miami, Florida, so if MI is in the house, please holler. I'll hear you. I'll feel your energy. But I come by way of Nigerian parents. My parents were both born and raised in Nigeria. I am a proud mother of 3 boys and happily married, and really excited to be a part of this project and to be able to communicate with you all. I love discussion. I love to talk. Those of you who know me know I love to talk. And I really love it when I can talk with my friends who are colleagues, but also talk with my patients and by an extension, my viewers. Because what I love about our viewers, when I hear from you all are healthcare professionals, you're patients who wish you had just a little bit more time with your doctors. We want to be that Dr. BFF. Ask us your questions that you can't squeeze in to a 15-minute visit, okay? We also want you all to know, how we think as healthcare professionals. I feel like as a group, doctors, nurses, and so forth, they don't ask us a lot of questions when it comes to politics and so forth. But we really do have opinions on it, and we should, because especially as emergency practitioners, we have our fingers on the pulse of any community. We see everybody, old, young, men, women, rich, poor. We turn no one away in the ER setting. And so we really know what's going on. And we really are, I think, the closest profession to public health, if you will. So that's who we are. That's When Docs Talk. We're excited to have you here. What I want to do before we get started is I want to take a brief moment of silence before we continue. I want to just preface this by saying that we started this topic and decided to have this topic almost half a year ago, because we've been away for a couple months now. Mm-hmm. And we decided when we come back, we're going to talk about the gun culture of America. And we already had the date on the calendar. So we were shocked and disheartened to know that in the mere time that we've had putting out flyers and so forth, there have been two mass shootings in grocery stores and in schools. And a lot of people have said, oh, I'm so glad you all are talking about this, in response to Uvalde or in response to Buffalo. It's not in response. We planned this before that. Mm-hmm. And yet we have to come here and face the recognition that in a day or so, who knows, we might be talking about these kind of things all over again. But let's take a few moments of silence for the victims of the Buffalo shooting and the Uvalde shooting. Okay. Thank you so much for allowing us to pay respect to the victims of those two tragedies. Those flowers were actually from Dr. Yuli's backyard. Is that right, Dr. Yuli?
Yes. I have a garden, and I also have been growing roses for about 15 years now.
Okay. Well, they're beautiful, like the beautiful lives of the children who were lost. We'll talk a little bit about that later on. But we always like to start the segment just by talking about what's on our minds, what's in the news. Obviously, what's in the news also correlates to our topic that we're discussing. But we always have a section called Hot Tops by the Docs. So tell me what was piquing your interest. What's on your mind, ladies? Sonia, anything that you've been reading that's been driving you crazy or giving you life?
Well, I think it's mostly driving me crazy. And I'm sure it's a lot of topics that people are, the shootings and Ukraine, and then also inflation, gas prices. But I think from the standpoint, really, just recently, I think the shootings have been so disheartening. And actually, I just saw something, is just really recent, but it kind of goes to show what people are feeling. So at the Barclays Center last night, they had a fight. And so about 1:00 in the morning, they heard some noise. It was a real loud noise, but they thought it was a shooter. They thought it was gunshots.
Yeah.
And so everybody started stampeding to get out of there, and 10 people were injured, even from that. And it was out of fear of being shot. And that was the first inclination when you heard that noise, that it was somebody potentially coming to shoot people.
Right.
For some of our viewers, tell us where the Barclays Center is again, and what.
So it's in New York, in Brooklyn.
In Brooklyn.
So that's where the Brooklyn Nets play.
I see.
Yeah.
So people heard a loud noise. They got freaked out that it might be a shooter, which is perfectly reasonable in the state that we live in. And so just everyone started stampeding and 10 people were injured. Is that right?
Yes. No, it looks like nobody got killed, but then the security was like, wait a minute, is there an active shooter? They locked it down. They told people to crouch down. They locked the doors. I mean, it was, absolutely terrifying because, really, once again, it just goes to show, can I go to the grocery store? Can I go to church? Can I go to a sports event and not have that fear that, I could potentially be shot?
Absolutely. Oh my goodness. That's very sad. Very sad. Thank you. Thank you so much for our viewers. Mark Anthony, we saw your comments. Ms. Cheryl Lumpkins, thank you for your comments. And Funny May, welcome. Thank you for joining us on this talk. Yeah, so, and in fact, Fun, I believe, is from New York, maybe even Brooklyn, so this might weigh in on her heart. But in any case, what else? What's going on in people's minds? Yolanda?
So many of you know, last time we had a show, I was pregnant. I've since given birth to my daughter, and I am a very fortunate mom because I'm able to exclusively breastfeed my child. But there are a lot of mothers who are needing to use formula for wwhatever reason. And this formula shortage is scary. Babies are coming in hyponatremic because people are stretching the formula out. And I looked up and I was like, what is being done? Like, what's the last thing that got done? So a week ago, U.S. military airplane transported 75,000 pounds of baby formula from a base in Germany, Remestein. I'm probably mispronouncing that.
Yeah.
That makes about 500,000 8-ounce bottles.
Okay.
But does anyone know how many babies on just WIC depend on formula?
Oh, tell me.
1.2 million.
Oh, God.
Million. So clearly that intervention, though great, is not going to be enough.
Yeah.
And I think the thing too, because I've been hearing a lot of people like, oh, they can breastfeed. And there's so many women that cannot breastfeed.
Right.
And, it's just even being sensitive to that, for whatever reason. Think about those young moms that had to have mastectomies to save their lives from breast cancer.
Or people who don't have, success with it, or people that for whatever reason don't choose to do it. I mean, it is a choice. I fully support it. I think it's great for babies and moms, but not everybody is able to or wants to, and that sure should be supported. And now they're like scrambling. One of our guests, who's coming on later, was telling me earlier in the week, she went in to buy something for a friend of hers, and she saw some baby formula. She had to snag some for her cousin because, that's on her mind. Like when she was thinking about buying a totally unrelated thing, she saw the formula. That's a hot commodity. Baby formula, baby food, nutrition for babies is a hot commodity in 2022 in America. I mean, really?
Exactly.
Anyway,
They're starting to restrict contraceptives.
Pardon?
I say in a place where they're starting to restrict contraceptives.
There we go. So tell us what's on your mind, Davida. You seem
I wanted to do I wanted to do a lighter contemporary issue. So I know a lot of people have been following the Amber Heard and Johnny Depp case. So I just found it interesting that Amber Heard is supposed to not be getting hired for the second Aquaman. If you don't know, she was in the first one. So for the second one, she's not supposed to be in it because she thought it was because of, the bad publicity surrounding her case. But apparently it's because, she ain't what they want. Okay. So I just wanted to,
this can right here, this can could have done better in that movie.
I completely forgot that she was in that movie, but I've been following the case. I was like, she was in that movie.
Right. Yeah. So that's there's so many things that come up. So some of our viewers might not be familiar, but I know a lot of our viewers are very up to speed with pop culture. So, there's a whole big court case between Johnny Depp and his ex-wife and so forth. But I see there's the issues that come up to me in my mind as somebody, in the healthcare profession is issues of domestic violence and intimate partner violence, of course, substance abuse. Those are all things. And there's a lot of ickiness going on there. I'm hearing about people defecating in beds and stuff like that. I mean, like, I don't even know if we need to to go there, but it's a very packed case with a lot of issues that at some point on When Docs Talk, we'll probably talk about. Like I said, at one point we will be having an episode on intimate partner violence and of course substance abuse. But yeah, those are all things that are on our mind. So what was on my mind, a new story that really stood out to me, and it's kind of tying in and going to segue us into our topic of discussion for tonight, is one of the victims of the Uvalde shooter, a teacher who was killed. Her husband soon thereafter died of a heart attack, like literally just days after. And it brought up the whole notion of broken heart syndrome and the high risk that people are at after somebody that they love dies for dying themselves. You know, we always you always hear like, you know, old wives' tales and people talking like, oh, you know, the partner died, so he didn't make it. And, you know, husband and wife, they loved each other so much, they died within days apart from each other. And it seems like just this strange phenomenon, but it's actually validated by evidence. Like we actually see studies that show that a grieving person's heart attack risk increases up to 21 times higher than normal within the first day of a loved one's death.
21.
Wow.
Yes. In fact, they published an article in Circulation, which is a really esteemed cardiology journal. And they show that risk for having a heart attack, it's still high. It gets a little bit lower in the days following the death, but the risk was still almost 6 times higher than normal within the first week. So 21 times higher risk for heart attack within the first day of losing a loved one, 6 times higher risk than normal, and then continues to steadily decline over the first month. But then there's something also called broken heart syndrome. It also has another name, Takotsubo syndrome.
Yes.
And it literally describes when a person's heart shape changes after a griefful or traumatic incident. So it's described a lot in women. Like, in fact, 88% of people who go through it are women. But basically, your heart literally changes its shape and then doesn't beat as well. So it's known as a cardiomyopathy. The heart is not functioning as well. And then they do studies on the person to see, do they have any blockages in their heart arteries, which usually is what causes heart attacks? And they see zero, nothing. They usually see normal arteries, but something with that mind-body grief-heart connection causes your heart to just lose shape and not work as well. And so I like to bring that up because I always am interested in the interface of the mind-body connection. I think it's something that we as physicians and we as healthcare professionals need to really discuss, because we know that when our patients are at their best mentally and their wellness is optimized, that their health is optimized. We know that. And I think that it's great that they're now starting to do studies that show this. But I was just so sad to hear about that woman's husband. First of all, she was slain. They have kids, and now he was slain. And they're like in their 40s. These are young people. And these are all the lives lost. So it's not just the people who were shot at whose lives are changed forever. I thought that was
And they left 4 kids.
4 kids.
They were 4 children, that they left behind.
I'm telling you. Have you all ever had or heard of people who soon thereafter died when their loved one died? Oh, yeah.
Usually, well, it's 2 cases I know personally, and both of them were married like 40, 50 years and died the same week.
Okay. Well, we all came here for a reason, and it's really to talk about gun violence, but not just gun violence. We want to talk about the gun culture. And that's really what our show was originally supposed to be about, gun culture. What is this culture of firearms in America? What does it look like? Do we support it? If we do, why or why not? What are the different talking points? Because we know it's a very heated discussion. This packing heat is very heated discussion, right? And so we're strapped as a nation. That's why we called it strapped. We have all these guns floating around, more guns than people is what I've been made aware of. We have the Second Amendment protecting our right to bear these arms, but then we have people who are dying because I believe I think it's multifactorial, right? But that's the debate. That is what is going on in almost everyone's kitchen table. Why is this happening? How can we stop it? Are the guns the problem? Are there other problems? So why a show on gun violence? Why are we even talking about it? Well, we know, according to Pew Research, that in 2020, over 45 45,000 Americans, specifically 222 Americans, more than any other year on record, died from gun-related injuries. And that same year, nearly 80% of all murders committed in the US involved a gun. Just in this month, the FBI reported a greater than 52% increase in active shooter incidents from 2020 to 2021. And according to Education Week, and this is the one that really surprised me, there have been 27 school shootings in the US in the first 5 months of this year, with dozens either killed or wounded. We also know that every day in America, more than 40 children lose a parent to shootings. And finally, we were made aware that the United States has a firearm homicide rate more than 25 times higher than other high-income countries. So this is an issue. You know, this is definitely something that we can't be silent about, right?
Right.
We know Lyndon Jones says in his opinion that people are comfortable in their norms and they're afraid to give up their guns. And that might be the case. But there's a lot of things that we're afraid to do. And I don't know if fear is going to be enough to explain this. I mean, this is a problem that we can't just keep ignoring or can't just keep being silent about. In fact, when we decided to do a moment of silence, I promised myself that's the last time I'm going to be silent about it. The moment of silence is for respect, but we cannot keep with the silence and only the thoughts and prayers. And I'm a big advocate of prayers and mindfulness. I wanted to also throw this up, ladies, for our viewers. So the CDC tells us that from in the last, I'd say 2-3 years, that the suicide rates from firearms continues to stay high, but we've seen a sharp increase, sharp spike for all ages in the number of homicide rates involving a firearm. And so it's a real thing, and it's a real problem, and it's not getting better. You know, there's a lot of people think, oh, it was the pandemic, you know, it made people depressed or sad and so forth. It's just not, we can't blame it on that, because it's, if you notice those charts, they've been steadily increasing.
Right.
There's never a lull. So I've talked a lot. I want you all to tell me a little bit about your thoughts on the subject. I know that you all had some very, very memorable points in your life and sometimes at work. Crazy stories, in fact, from the ER, where you have experienced gun violence. Go ahead.
So I think that I have a lot of memorable experiences dealing with gun violence at work in the ER. So Dr. Ipe and I worked in the same ER. That's how I met her. And there are a lot of specific situations that happen with guns, but I'm going to talk about this one. So I was in one of the medical zones, and there was a patient that came in through EMS. So at this particular hospital, if you're coming in through EMS, they just wave the wand over you and they just let you go back to the back.
That's right. And EMS is emergency medical services, like the ambulance, essentially, right?
The ambulance, yeah. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times if it beeps, they don't do a thorough search. They just let them handle it in the back. So with this particular patient, he came in because he was combative, schizophrenic. He was saying that he was suicidal. And then throughout the time during his stay at the ER, he escalated. You know, he was starting to become argumentative with the staff. He was threatening the staff. He was going back and forth saying that he was going to shoot this person, which was one of the nurses that was helping take care of him. Later on, when he got a bed in the inpatient psych unit in the hospital, and they had to, he had a sitter the entire time. He had a sitter. With his sitter, he was very he was cooperative, nice, and he was about to get ready to go upstairs. So she was just saying, "Okay, well, you know, going to have a new sitter when you get upstairs." He said, "You know what? I like you. Reach over here and get what's underneath this cover." And she was like, "Hold on, what you tell me?" He's like, "No, it ain't like that." It can't be like that in the ER. I'm just saying, you know. Yeah. And she was like, "What's under the cover?" She pulls back the cover and he hands her a gun.
Wow.
A loaded gun. So while he was making all these threats to the nurse that was helping take care of him, he could have actually went through with the threat. And that is the scariest. Like, This man was literally threatening everybody that was coming in there, and he could have shot everybody. That's scary. Just the potential. You're going to work and you have the greatest intentions on taking care of people, and your life is threatened every day.
Absolutely. That's horrifying, actually. That's
Yeah.
horrifying. And thank God he liked her and decided to let her into the fact that he still had.
Exactly.
Those of you who don't know, in that setting, in an emergency department, he should have had all of his valuables confiscated. He should have been dressed down into a gown, basically, that has nothing that he could harm himself or others with.
Right.
And yet he had a loaded gun on him
the entire time.
Wow.
Yeah.
Sonia, you had a story that you wanted to share with our viewers.
Yeah, once again, I'm family medicine, and so haven't really worked in a ER trauma setting, but have seen kind of the aftermath. And I think that's a lot of times people don't realize too. Even if somebody doesn't die, but they were shot, what happens to them afterwards? And so we had a patient that came in, and so her husband had shot her and then shot himself. He died and she lived, but she was in a wheelchair, paralyzed. And so, and she was young. She was like in her, 50s. But the thing is, she's going to be living the rest of her life, from the standpoint disabled, having to have people to care for her. And then also just mentally from the standpoint of living through that horrible event, and so for me, it was just like, wow. Once again, the incident itself of being shot, that's one thing, but what do you do afterwards when you're dealing with the injury? And even just the violence itself, like the event itself, the horror that had to, that she could have felt just even being shot, and it was by her husband. And just when I heard that story, it was just amazing to me that this woman was still there, though, still fighting.
Yeah.
Still had the spirit inside of her that regardless of what had happened to her, that she was still, whatever she had to do day to day to make it, she was doing it.
Wow.
And Sonia, honestly, you bring up a really important point. There's a lot of fanfare and a lot of noise when these things happen, and we send our thoughts and prayers, and we're very supportive of the victims. But when all the noise has died down,
exactly,
what happens?
Yes.
They're left. They go home and they're left to deal with this.
Yes.
Even if they don't have a mark on their body. Like there's one young victim of this last shooting, little girl, I believe 10 years old, who literally in an act of self-survival smeared her best friend's blood all over herself in order to look wounded and play dead. And they saw her after, and they wanted to rush her to the hospital, and they realized she wasn't actually injured, but she was, though, wasn't she?
Exactly.
Right?
Mentally, yes.
Like mentally, what is this little girl who's the same age as my son, one of my sons? How is she going to cope with that? So that's really impactful. Yolanda, you wanted to share with us as well.
Similar to Sonia, I am family medicine, so I haven't worked per se in a trauma setting. But the story that actually came to mind is something that happened in a place called San Pedro Sula, which is in Honduras. So at the time, this is 2012, one of the most dangerous cities in the world. And we were staying across the street from the hospital. We were there doing a medical mission trip. And I remember seeing armed guards around us, like not with little 22s, like they had automatic weapons. And I remember them bringing people into the ER. There were no doctors there. They came and got us with the guns. And so these people, I mean, I speak Spanish and probably half the doctors there spoke Spanish, but I remember going over there trying to take care of this person who was injured in various ways. And I remember there being kids outside with the same guns. And I remember just bullets. And I don't know what happened with outside, but when we finished, we had to go all the way around and come back, and it was just deserted. And I remember thinking, gosh, I hope I never feel like this in my own country. Well, here we are.
Yeah.
That's right.
Wow.
And I think that you also mentioned to me when we were having another discussion before, I vaguely remember you telling me that when you went to other countries, people were asking you, "Oh, how is it like in America where everyone shoots each other?"
Yeah, when my last trip, I went with my husband to Thailand. We went on a food tour, and there were some people from New Zealand, Australia, Germany. We were talking about the food, and then they were like, "So why does everybody have automatic weapons in America?" And we were like, "Okay, are we getting these questions because we are black? Because we look like extra black? Like my husband's dreadlocked down and tattooed up?" And yes, but they're like, "No, we just don't understand why all you Americans have guns." And I didn't have an explanation for them because we are gun owners, but we not just bang bang shoot 'em up. We don't own, weapons like that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, let me tell you what stands out in my mind, and I have quite a few stories, but I really want to tell you about the one that I remember very poignantly. And it was when I was working at a level 1 trauma center that I used to work at, the one that I met Davida in, and the one of our future guests that's coming on in a few minutes worked as a trauma surgeon. I had just given birth to my second son, Uwana, and I remember there was a trauma call. So they always, whenever there's a trauma, whether it's a gunshot wound, a stab wound, somebody gets in a car accident, they always page overhead and let us know in the emergency department that somebody's coming so that we can prepare. And so we were aware that there was a patient who was coming in with gunshot wounds. And we later learned as he was being wheeled in, he was 17 years old and he had multiple gunshot wounds. So my job and my crew's job in the emergency department was to stabilize him. He was intubated, meaning we put a tube in his airway to help him breathe. And we realized at that point he had so many injuries, he'd have to go straight to the operating room. So we went to the operating room. And so after that happens, a lot of excitement at the time, but we go back to our day. We continue to take care of other patients. We keep it moving because that's just how we do in the ER. And we later learned that the hospital is now on lockdown because one of the residents I was teaching, they had to go to the restroom and they're like, Dr. Ipe, we can't go to the restroom. They've locked the doors. So I said, what do you mean they've locked the doors? So I went to talk to the security guard. They said we could not leave the building. They locked all of the entrances into our particular area in the trauma suite. And they said that there was an active shooter, is what we were told at the time. An active shooter. And then it was clarified later that what happened was the shooting that had taken place with this young man that we had just sent to the operating room, apparently it was somehow gang related, and the people who had shot him found out that he didn't die and they wanted him to die. So they were going to come and try and finish the job. So they had come through the hospital and the security police were trying to reach them. So I'm like, oh Lord. And this was maybe just a few days, maybe a week after the Aurora shooting at the movie theater in Colorado. And so mass shootings were very, very at the forefront of our mind. So we were all scared. And my whole thing was, I really actually want to leave right now. I don't want to be here. So can we please unlock these doors and let us sister through? Because I'm not even trying to be a part of this. But obviously that can't happen. And we had to just continue taking care of patients. So we did. And about an hour after receiving that announcement, I hear commotion and I hear the doors opening up, the doors that were supposed to be locked and that were being protected by an armed guard. And I hear someone say, everybody get the F down. And they didn't say F, but I'm just going to try and keep it PG for this audience today. So what would you think? Because I'll tell you what I'm thinking. I'm thinking, okay, I'm about to die because I know that the doors are locked. All of a sudden now there's commotion. Somebody's telling everyone to get down. I know that now the doors are breached. And here I am. All I did was go to work. I'm just trying to be a doctor and live my best life, guys. So instead, what am I doing? Now I ran and I'm hiding on my belly underneath a hospital gurney, as are all the nurses and all of the other people. And some of the patients were on backboards because when they come in from a motor vehicle accident or something, we have to put them on backboards till we can clear them and make sure that they don't have any broken bones in their spine. But we couldn't do that because now we're thinking self-preservation. So the patients that were left on backboards while all the nurses and doctors in that department scattered to find a place to hide, I could hear them crying because they're like, okay, we're going to be shot first, right? So as I'm on my belly next to another nurse and we're hiding under a gurney at work, my cell phone rings. And I was like, okay, so I'm really I'm gonna be the first one to die today. Because it rang loud. They have a very loud cell phone. So as the phone rang, I started thinking about my baby that I wasn't gonna see ever again, my husband, my other son, who was very young at the time, must have been like 4, not even, maybe 3. And the nurse next to me starts crying because she's next to me. So she's like, oh, you're gonna get us both killed because of your phone.
Right.
I'm gonna make a long story short. It didn't turn out that it was a shooter in the department. They had actually apprehended the gunman at a different point near the gift store, is what I heard. But it was another commotion, another tragedy. Somebody had tried to hang himself, and it just caused a bunch of calamity. But the long and short of it is, I went that day to work to take care of patients, to try and save lives. So why the hell was I on my belly thinking I'm about to die and never see my family again? That's the question I have for you. We're going to go to commercial break. We're going to bring on our expert guests, and they're going to join us in this conversation. Welcome to When Docs Talk. We'll be back after the break. Okay, that was a word from one of our sponsors, Skinworks Day Spa here in Georgia, in Covington. But without further ado, I really want to bring out our guests because we have a great lineup. We have a good discussion going on here, and we want our experts to weigh in on it. And they come from all walks of lives. So let me start off by introducing Assistant District Attorney Tyshawn Jackson. She is a senior assistant district attorney with the Office of the DeKalb County District Attorney and the head of Firearm Violence Prevention Unit. Tyshawn graduated in the top 25% of her class at Florida Coastal School of Law in 2012. She also performed over 400 hours of pro bono services in the Disability and Public Benefits Clinic, where she received honors for her achievement. Tyshawn began her legal career as a staff attorney to the Honorable Aisha F. Jackson, Superior Court Judge of the Stone Mountain Judicial Circuit. She then went on to work as an Assistant Solicitor General in the Office of the DeKalb County Solicitor General, where she served as the Senior Assistant Solicitor General with the Special Victims Unit, handling high-risk domestic violence and crimes against the disabled, elderly, and children. She now serves as a Senior Assistant District Attorney, where she prosecutes various violent felony crimes involving firearms. When we asked her why she wanted to be a part of the show, Ms. Jackson explained, the Firearm Violence Prevention Unit has one goal: to reduce the proliferation of gun violence. And anytime there is an opportunity to educate the public on lawful gun ownership and the responsibility of gun owners, we are well on our way of achieving this goal. We're so honored to have her here today. Welcome, ADA Tyshawn Jackson.
Thank you so much, Dr. Didi. Thank you all for having me, and I look forward to engaging in this conversation with you all.
We're excited to have you here. Thanks a lot.
Welcome.
Welcome.
Let's bring on our next guest. We have with us Dr. Omar K. Danner. Dr. Danner is the President and Chief Executive Officer of Danbar for Life, LLC, a corporate and personal weight management, health optimization, and wellness education company in Atlanta, Georgia. He is also an adjunct professor of surgery and surgical critical care medicine at Morehouse School of Medicine, and recently completed his executive MBA at the Terry College of Business at the University of Georgia, with a focus in leading evolving organizations, strategic management, and decision-making. He is a data analytics expert and healthcare quality improvement specialist who is certified as a Lean Six Sigma Black Belt and professional LSS facilitator. He's also the former chief of surgery and trauma director for Morehouse School of Medicine at Grady Memorial Hospital, where he served on faculty for 12 years and also served as president of the Morehouse School of Medicine Faculty Assembly. As the president and CEO of Danbar for Life, a healthy lifestyle change value-based healthcare optimization and weight management education support company, He says his principal aim is to use healthcare data and analytic tools to help organizations to curtail the rising cost of healthcare delivery while improving the quality of care. A native of Birmingham, Alabama, Dr. Danner received his medical degree from the University of Alabama School of Medicine in 1995, where he also completed his general surgery residency. He subsequently completed an advanced fellowship training at the Johns Hopkins University School of Medicine in surgical critical care and trauma in 2002, after which he joined the surgical faculty as a clinical instructor, attending trauma surgeon, and surgical intensivist. After that, he matriculated at the University of Pittsburgh Medical Center, where he completed his advanced minimally invasive and endoscopic surgery and bariatric surgery, hernia, and foregut surgery fellowship training. He's trained numerous surgical residents and ACS fellows and educated many medical students, and is a diplomat of the American Board of Surgery, doubly board certified in surgery and surgical critical care. He's a fellow of the American College of Surgeons and a member of several prestigious surgical and critical care organizations. Dr. Danner also developed a youth violence prevention program called Stop the Violence Atlanta, and has published numerous works on violence prevention. Notably, he is a co-author on the scientific article, Reducing the Impact of Violence on the Health Status of African Americans, Literature Review and Recommendations from the Society of Black Academic Surgeons in the American Journal of Surgery. WDT asked him why he wanted to participate in this series, and he responded, because of his professional working relationship with Dr. Ipe and others at Grady Memorial Hospital and his experience as a trauma surgeon. He says he thinks that we as physicians need to have more honest dialogue with each other and the people that we serve. This accomplished surgeon, whom we are so honored to have with us, is also married and has two wonderful children, Aaron and Christian. Please help me in welcoming Dr. Omar K. Danner.
Thank you, Dr. Ipke. It's such an honor to be here among such distinguished guests and hosts. Really is a pleasure for me to be able to join you guys this evening. And I think, like you said, this is an important discussion and a timely discussion. I was just looking at another news clip that flashed across the screen last night or earlier, probably 8:17. There was another article where 6 teens in Memphis got shot, 2 critically injured. And so the issue of gun violence in America rages, and these mass shootings are becoming more common and more frequent. So I look forward to the discussion, and again, I'm excited.
Well, we're excited to have you. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Let's bring on our next guest. So we're joined by Dr. Uduak Afanide, PhD and LPC. She is a licensed professional counselor and founder and CEO of Afanide Therapy. She's also a professor at Faulkner University in Montgomery, Alabama. She taught at the University of Calabar in Nigeria for 15 years and then relocated her family to Montgomery, Alabama, where she has been teaching for 13 years in the science department. She is the immediate past chair of the Department of Natural and Physical Sciences. Dr. A, as she calls herself and her patients refer to her, felt the need to invest in the mental well-being of students, which prompted her to seek a degree in mental health counseling in 2017 and ultimately to found Afanide Therapy. As an advocate for mental wellness, she states, the goal at Afanide Therapy is to destigmatize therapy among people of color, and we have various initiatives to make that happen. She's been married for 30 years to Peter Afanide and has 3 children. In fact, her husband and her founded the Nigerian Christian Science College in 2002. She's an author of 5 books, including a textbook for non-majors biology used in various universities in Alabama and Tennessee. Her latest book is My Therapy Notebook, a companion on your mental wellness journey. She tells us that she wanted to join this series on gun violence because, as a therapist, I walk alongside clients who deal with gun-related trauma, and it is important to legitimate and the impact of these experiences. These experiences have a very profound impact on people, and we need to put our heads together to end preventable violence. We completely agree with and welcome to the stage Dr. Uduak Afangide. Dr. A, welcome.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone.
And last but not least, we want to bring in, I'm going to call him our resident expert on firearms, because he really did help us. You're going to see some clips of how he was teaching us, really breaking down some knowledge for the WDT crew. We have Mr. Lee Boyd. Mr. Boyd is an advanced therapeutic endoscopic technician who describes himself as a country guy from the state that is often referred to as the sportsman's paradise. He hails from Bow Bridge, Louisiana. He is a frontline worker working in emergency settings and has lived in the suburbs of Metro Atlanta for the past 35 years. When asked why he wanted to join WDT in this discussion, he explains, "Firearms run deep through my DNA. I want to educate and deliver a positive message regarding firearms from a responsible owner and collector." As I mentioned, Lee was instrumental on educating our WDT crew at the gun range, especially our novices. We're so happy to have him with us today. Please welcome Mr. Lee Boyd.
Good evening. Good evening, guys. It is such a pleasure to be invited to this wonderful forum, and I would love to be brutally honest about my experience and like they say, having the DNA of firearms, and not only that, having firearms safety and training. So thanks again for having me, and I'll be happy to share any experience or my attributes that I could add from the stereotypical world of African Americans into the sport of firearms and owning firearms. So thanks again.
And thank you. So I'm going to start off because I know I admit I was that novice that we were talking about at the gun range. I admit a complete illiteracy when it comes to guns. We asked several of our viewers from WDT to fill out a survey, and we asked, do they own a gun? And we had about almost 150 participants. And I would say about 70%, 71% to be exact, did not own guns. And I, at that point, was in that crew, in that group. The reason I bring this up is here at When Docs Talk, we are very much about educating, okay? And because I am completely uneducated when it comes to guns, we want to understand, because we hear all these terms, AR-15 and assault rifle and so forth. And so I'm going to start with ADA Jackson, Tyshawn, because when we were having our pre-show discussion, she was talking about the difference between the different guns. And there's a lot of movements that are advocating for a ban on certain types of guns. So let's all educate ourselves. You know, those of you might know a little bit more, but tell us the difference between what we're calling assault rifles and how regular firearms can be converted into more dangerous ones, if you don't mind.
Yes, that's a great question. So you have regular handguns. There's your typical handguns that you see and that you hear about. And now they have these things called, for example, Glock switches. The Glock switch they will put on a handgun of a Glock. The Glock switch, which takes literally 30 seconds to put on, it's a little mechanism that puts on the back of the handgun that makes that Glock handgun a fully automatic weapon. And so typically when you fire a gun, it's pow, a handgun is pow, 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 pow. However, when you put that Glock switch on it, it goes pop, 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 pop. And those are banned. They are illegal. They're illegal by federal government statute as well as state statutes throughout the state, all the states. But that's what turns a handgun into a fully automatic handgun. Then you have your AR, which are your rifles. Now, people add bump stocks to those, but bump stocks are not illegal because it doesn't convert it into a fully automatic weapon.
But what's a bump stock? What's a bump stock? What does it do?
So a bump stock is, okay, so I'm trying to explain it in detail. When you have a bump, so rifles have a regular stock on it, and then the bump stock makes it rapid fire again makes the bullets fire faster, but the federal government doesn't categorize it into a fully automatic weapon by adding the bump stock. So because of the bump stock is not a fully automatic weapon, it's not illegal. But it is most certainly almost as if it is a fully automatic weapon in so many terms. But it doesn't, the cessation of the rapid fire doesn't, in the eyes of the government, qualify as a fully automatic weapon.
Okay. I'm gonna go to Lee. Tell us about, do you really see or think there's a big difference in terms of danger to the public with the different firearms?
In all fairness, from an educational standpoint, and for the responsible firearm users, firearms are not deadly. It's the person behind the firearm. So I just hate the fact that all the negative publicity. I've been collecting firearms for over 30 years and I haven't shot anyone yet. So I think with protecting yourself and having a firearm in a responsible, educated, trained individual, nothing is wrong with a firearm. And back to the question about AR, we hear it being called assault rifles, or basically the definition of an AR is a armor light rifle. But we, as the uneducated public, really always say it's an assault rifle. So bottom line, the correct terminology for our AR is armor light rifle. It's not an assault rifle. So bottom line, I feel that an officer cannot be at my door in an event that somebody kicked my door down. But with that being said, I am not opposed to not having a firearm to protect myself.
Well, let me ask you a question though, from the standpoint, the different types. Do you think like there should be a certain, there should be limitations from the standpoint of, certain level of, how many rounds can be shot in a certain amount of time? There's a big difference between something that's automatic gun in which can put out so many bullets at one time versus a handgun and a pistol. So yeah, I can protect myself with a pistol. Do I need something that's going to have such rapid fire and do so much carnage?
I'll be brutally honest with you that we as gun collectors and sportsmen, we take the Second Amendment Constitution to the extreme. With that being said, I will say that no deer, no hunter that I know, whether it's in Louisiana or anywhere in the U.S., have to shoot a deer 30 times.
Right.
Yes.
Right. I think that's a really important point. Like, even if you say it's just for hunting, do you really need that much ammunition? Mm-hmm. I wanted to ask Dr. Danner, because we're talking about the different types of guns, but let's talk about the impact on the bodies. Like, does it even make a difference whether it's a Glock, which is a handgun, versus these other things? We know that it makes a difference in terms of how many people you can shoot in a short period of time in a mass shooting. But when it comes down to the individual, what do you see as a trauma surgeon in terms of what these firearms are doing to bodies?
I think that's a great question. And the thing that I like telling a lot of the young people is that it's not like the movies where you kind of hold your hand on your belly, your arm, you limp in. The truth of the matter is guns kill. And when a gun is used in an act of violence or suicide, the kill rate, the death rate actually goes up significantly. So when we're in the operating room and we're operating for penetrating trauma, say a low velocity stab wound versus say a penetrating missile injury from a gun, it doesn't just enter the exit site, the entrance site, it basically creates a wound at the exit site when it goes kind of through and through. But in between there, it causes multiple organ damage. So we may see a hole in the large intestine, the small intestine, maybe in the liver. Sometimes we have to take out the spleen or holes in the stomach. And so the thing is, it depends on the body area, the cavity, and it also depends on the number of missile injuries. So when someone is involved in a typical shooting, it's most of the time by a handgun, a single handgun, about 61% of the time. Assault rifles are actually infrequent, but when they're used, the issue is that they cause not only the damage that a single fire weapon will cause, it causes multiple injuries. Remember one kid, he came in, he was shot 13 times. I had 13 bullet holes that we could find. And I remember sitting in the trauma bay with him, and he asked me, he was still alive. He said, "Dr. Danner, don't let me die. Don't let me die." And we told him, "Hey, we're going to take good care of you," and, we were able to get him through that. But that's not always the story. It's not always the truth. But I want to touch on one thing. And I was reading, I know everybody has seen what happened in Uvalde and some of the story, the backstories behind it. But there were kids that were text messaging to the police, calling 911, begging for someone to come in to save them. And the question is, why didn't they rush in? This is a politically sticky situation that's going to play itself out, in the media and behind the scenes. But one of the things, from an officer or trainer of the SWAT teams, he said, when somebody has an assault rifle, it changes the game. And it doesn't, the police, they're human too. They're not, so gung-ho about charging in with somebody's armed with a military style rifle, which don't belong on the streets.
Right.
And that's the issue when you start getting to these semi-automatic and automatic weapons. They belong for military combat, not in a civilian society, high-end, probably the most advanced civilian society on the face of the planet in the history of mankind. That's what the problem is.
I hear you. We actually have a veteran. I always call on Sonia and talk to Sonia because we have a veteran, and we've had other guests on our show who are law enforcement. And of course, we consider our prosecutor in the ADA, she upholds the law. She's law enforcement as well. I always ask the question, do police, law enforcement, and military also agree with several people like myself, for instance, who don't think that these sort of firearms should be in the hands of civilians?
Well,
Go ahead.
Well, that is a great statement because if and of course everyone's been listening to the news, President Biden already said it, followed up by Vice President Harris, that there needs to be a ban on these rifles or on these fully automatic weapons. And here's the reason. Yes, Dr. Danner is correct that a lot of our shootings in America are by handguns. But when you have those mass shootings where 19 are dead in a matter of minutes, you have another shooting where 14 are dead in a matter of minutes. And all of those who are committing those murders are using these assault rifles. And again, like Dr. Danner said, it changed the conversation when police have to come up with a strategy in order to stop this threat. Because when you have a person with that fully automatic weapon who then also have 7 magazines, which hold 30 rounds at least on their person, they're capable of shooting 210 bullets in a matter of minutes. It takes no more than 30 seconds to extract that magazine out of the rifle that suspect was having on his person in Uvalde, and replacing it with another round magazine, and then continue to slaughter those who are kids.
Yeah.
And so I totally agree in this instance with President Biden and Vice President Harris that these guns do not need to be in the hands of civilians, because even if you want to look at, the first thing everyone say is, let's look at the mental health, or let's make gun laws, let's make it more restrictive, or as far as the background checks. Well, This guy was 18 years old with no mental health background, with no criminal background, with no domestic violence misdemeanor. So therefore, he would have been able, considering the circumstances of whatever Congress thought to pass in reference to legislation regarding mental health and regarding regarding whether or not they were a felon or restricting the background to prevent access. He would have passed everything with flying colors and still been able to kill 19 people, 19 children.
And 2 adults.
And two adults.
So it sounds like you're saying, in this case, it's the gun. Yes, he may have mental illness, but he might have been able to pass, a mental illness background check. It's not
Would have been
just
able to
a
pass.
mental illness issue. I actually, that's one of the talking points that we often hear. So it's not a gun issue, it's a mental health issue. So I wanna bring in our mental health specialist, Dr. A, to talk a little bit about guns and mental illness. I'm not going to even ask the question because I think we all would say a resounding yes. We know that we're not doing the best that we can do for people with mental health in this country. But is this problem, is what we're seeing in schools, churches, movie theaters, is this all mental health, Dr. A?
That's a hard question, because when people talk about it's that this person has a mental health issue, what comes first to my mind as a mental health counselor is we're talking about the mental health of the person who committed the crime. Who's talking about the mental health of the people that are left behind mourning their lost loved ones? Who's talking about the mental health of the child that has to wake up the next day and be put on a school bus all the way across the country to go to school? Mm-hmm. Who's talking about the effects that this is having on our kids? As parents, we're supposed to create a safe space for our children, and our children don't feel safe. And so even when they're not facing real threat, mentally, the whole idea of a perceived threat, your body reacts in the exact same way as if it was a real threat.
Oh, yes.
And so mental illness, if someone is diagnosed with a mental illness, there are things put in place for them to get the help that they need. But it's not a mental health issue when you go in and kill someone. The real mental health problem is the mental health of the people who are impacted by the things that you do.
Mm-hmm. That's a really excellent point that you're making, that we often focus on the mental health of the person who did the shooting. We don't talk about the long-term mental health of the people, not only who were directly impacted, but even those on the periphery, even us.
Miles
and miles away.
Even our children.
Yes.
The whole idea, schools are no longer associated for our children as a place to learn, a place to be safe, a place to make friends. And yet we keep telling them that's what it is. But that's not what they hear on the news. That's not what they hear in our conversations that we're having with other adults. And then the next day, they're supposed to get up. As adults, when you were, Dr. Edidion, when you were talking about what happened in the hospital and you lying under the table and you thinking, this is trauma.
Yeah.
All trauma is an emotional response to something. Mm. You're an adult. You have lived experiences that allow you to verbalize how you feel, and you have tools and skills all through your life. Our kids don't have any of that. They don't have the language to talk about how they feel. Right. And a lot of times they act out in different ways, all because we have not, as a society, as a people, we've not provided a safe space for them. So when we talk about destigmatizing mental health, we as adults don't even model the right response to mental health. We don't go to therapy. We don't have therapists.
That's right. That's right.
Hey, baby, you'll be fine. Go to school. Mommy will be here. She'll pick you up tomorrow. You should pick you up when school is over. School is no longer a safe space. They don't have this language. All they know is all they say, I don't want to go to school. Mm-hmm. And we're like, no, baby, you got to go to school, And they can't tell you that they don't feel safe.
That they don't feel safe. And we as adults, sometimes we just become numb. When we asked our viewers in our survey, do you feel like you're becoming numb or desensitized to the stories of gun violence? Quite a few of them, I'd say more than 50%, almost 60% said false. So they don't feel like they're being numb. They still are impacted, but quite a few people, 41%, do feel like they're trying to use those coping mechanisms. And we kind of have to, right? I mean, if we were to internalize all that's going on every single day, could we really function? And then another thing to your point about mental illness, I always say this among friends, and you guys can tell me what you think, guests. Are we the craziest country in the world? I don't think so. Like mental illness, I don't want to believe that Americans are the only ones with mental illness. There are lots of countries that have people who are mentally ill, and they don't have the same problem with people getting gunned down. So it can't just be that. In fact, the National Alliance on Mental Health issued a statement saying, listen, if this were a mental health issue and this was the only issue involved here, we would see roughly the same number of mass shootings around the world, but we don't. We don't.
Access.
Well,
Access.
I don't agree with the doctor's comment earlier about not executing our Second Amendment right. And also, too, we always talk about mass. It's fortunate that we had this discussion pre-planned a year in the making, but it's unfortunate we only talk about gun violence in America when there is a mass shooting. But I don't know if you guys are aware, on a daily basis, over 300 people are shot in America. On a daily basis, out of those 300, at least right over 100 of them are murdered in America. So we talk about the healthcare, we talk about whether we should possess certain firearms or not. How about the judicial system? Are they doing their part? I have several friends that are in law enforcement where they could arrest someone in the metro area and be for an illegal firearm, a history of a felon, and it is illegal to possess a firearm if you are a convicted felon, but let alone a stolen firearm. And before the ink dries on the paper, these judges are allowing these kids, bottom line, these young punks that's doing bad things to wonderful citizens of the Metro Atlanta out on signature bails. So maybe our prosecutor could shed some light on that. Is that why are you guys allowing them to get out of jail?
I would love to happily answer that question. First thing, we're not trying to restrict those who are, want their Second Amendment right to be heard. We understand that the United States has a right to Second Amendment, but therefore restricting the sale of fully automatic weapons does not restrict your right to still own firearms. Now, in reference to Mr. Lee's statement, yes, murders are happening every day. And let me tell you, we have lawful gun owners in our country. And this is what is happening. Lawful gun owners are leaving their guns in their car. Their cars are getting broken into. Their firearms are being stolen. And now those guns are on the street in the hands of those who are not able to possess firearms. And shootings are happening and murders are happening in our country. Now, as a prosecutor, all I could do is wholeheartedly fight for my victims who have succumbed to firearm violence, whether they have passed away or have been injured and have been in the ER, and you all have attended to them. Once I get my information and once our officers do their job, and let me talk about the officers. I know there's a lot of heat going on with law enforcement around this country, and rightfully so. I am human. Just because I'm a prosecutor doesn't mean I'm not deterred by some of the things that I've seen. But the counter effect of all this bad news of law enforcement officers are leaving. They are leaving the field. They are going and seeking other professions. And now mostly in every metropolitan city, the law enforcement agencies are struggling. They are struggling to keep law enforcement officers on the street. Just for example, in the district that I prosecute, typically before, let's say before, I'm going to say 5-6 years ago, the average number of officers in that department was 900. It's now down to 350 to 4.
Wow.
So you may have had in the past 30 detectives on a shift that dealt with homicide and assaults. Now you may have 7. And then with the rapid rise and continuous crime in the county, they're now working double shifts, overtime, unlimited overtime. Things are getting missed. I'm not going to sit here and tell you they're not. So then when the case comes to me as a prosecutor and I have to try this murder, certain things are not here. I don't have this. I don't have that. I don't have the audio, things. And it's no fault to law enforcement officers who have probably worked literally 36 hours continuous in order to solve this crime. And while they're trying to solve this murder, another murder happens.
Right.
I have to stop and do that murder. And
Right.
so now it comes to us, and we have to put forth our best effort to still seek justice. And guess what? We do get it done. And there are times that we can't.
Okay.
But at any rate, just to, and I'll stop. But when Mr. Lee was stating that these judges are given signature bonds, some cases, unfortunately, cannot get signature bonds. So regardless of whatever the circumstance or facts may be, judges cannot give signature bonds to those who have been accused of murder. Judges cannot give signature bonds to those who have been accused of armed robbery. Judges cannot give signature bonds to aggravated child molestation, etc. So there are certain cases or certain, for example, theft by receiving stolen property, considering certain factors, which we call the Ayala factors, whether or not they're a threat to society, considering their criminal history. Those are things that the judge takes into account. And it's ultimately the judge's decision to render whatever bond they see fit, whether it be a signature bond or a bond, and then they will also a monetary amount, and they'll also give conditions of those bonds. But as a prosecutor, all I could do is put forth the evidence that I have, give the judge as much information as necessary, and judges have to make that decision as to what kind of bond they will give citizens, considering certain factors, again, such as their criminal history. If they lack criminal history, then you still have to think about this. These are still people, right? So if you get a person who's arrested on stealing a firearm out of a car, 18 years old, never committed a felony, never been arrested, not even committed a misdemeanor, you cannot. Well, I perceive judges feel that this person should not be in custody continuously until their case comes for trial. Considering the backlog that happened during COVID, we're still trying cases that were pre-COVID that was set to try during COVID, and is now you're getting to their 8th Amendment rights to unfair and uncruel punishment. And so these are things judges have to take into consideration when they are setting these bonds, and take into account, every person who comes before them, considering the factors, and they have to make the educated decision, and the judges have to live with that. But we don't sit here and put everyone in jail, throw them under the jail just because they have a single charge.
Right. And that's understandable. One thing that brings up something in my mind, this whole discussion about law enforcement and what they're doing and what they're not doing and so forth. Oftentimes we hear, that guns don't kill people, people kill people. In fact, several times this weekend after the shootings, we've heard from former President Trump, and also, I believe, Ted Cruz mentioned that evil in our world is not a reason to disarm law-abiding citizens and so forth. And then somebody else mentioned about how, I think it was Dr. Danner mentioned in this particular case in Texas, how law enforcement were somewhat blamed for not going in quickly enough. So my question to you all now is, do you support the notion of what really will stop a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun? And with that logic, we should have more guns out there in the hands of ordinary civilians. In fact, would you even support the notion possibly of having school administrators and teachers have guns? I see people shaking their head. Jump in there.
Not at all.
Right, because I'm saying this is straight only because school teachers and everybody has a life outside of their job. And some people, they are law-abiding citizens. I'm not saying that everybody is bad, but some people also, they don't necessarily live within the bounds of the law. So just because they have a certain title does not mean that they should probably be carrying the guns at school.
Absolutely. I think, Dr. Danner, you were going to say something too. Sorry.
Yeah, no. What I was going to say, though, I think that, the core and crux of the argument is who should be screened. Should there be laws to limit who should have guns? I think everybody starts out with, full rights according to the Second Amendment, but there are some people who are, whether it's irresponsible by committing crimes. And then you have the debate of mental illness. The problem with mental illness, we say mental health, a lot of times is mental illness. And when you're talking about, say, somebody who has a paranoid schizophrenia or post-traumatic stress syndrome from a previous assault, the thing is, versus depression or a little anxiety, all mental health issues are not the same. So without being able to evaluate them and define who in our society qualifies to safely carry a firearm and who doesn't, the issue is putting laws and conditions in that block us from having the right kind of conversation when doctors talk. Yep. Having a discussion where we can go through and dissect that, because I think, again, I'll state it openly that, I believe in the amendments and I believe in, the Constitution of the United States of America. But the discussion about guns is not about the Constitution. That's to take people off of what the main subject is. And having responsible laws and having guns, I think that people, if they're responsible and they prove that they're worthy, I think that, it's okay to own a gun. I don't have a problem with that. I do question whether or not basically you should have them in certain places, like in churches or in schools. I don't think that's a place where guns belong per se.
Well, you actually
individuals
in agreement. I was going to say, most people who did our survey agree with you completely. We asked, should people be able to carry guns in schools and churches for protection? And the vast majority either strongly disagreed or disagreed, with very few in support. So you're definitely in good company.
Well, the thing is, I think that having, like their officers, there should be, people there who are paid to do this kind of thing. I think that now safety is a big issue, and we should have people there who can protect the people, the students, the congregants, if there is a breach of that nature. But I don't think that I should go and become the Keystone Cop or police and take matters into my own hand, because there are lapses in judgment. And I think that it's a still touchy issue because of what happened in South Carolina. This is just a prayer service where you're not going to hire security for a 9-person prayer service. So it becomes, I think, also situational. I don't think, to be honest, the pastor had a gun. I'll be honest, I don't think it's a crime. That's where you have to be careful with the laws. But I don't think that just this free willy-nilly carrying of guns should go unmetered, because the presence of guns is what's associated with these events. In country where there's a decreased presence of guns, there's less injury, there's less people being shot. And when people use guns versus other means of violence, people die at a higher rate. And the last thing I'll say, which is very good, I think Lee kind of talked about, he could touch on this, is gun safety training. People should go through some kind of process so that now they can become, quote, responsible gun owners. Because although we talk about homicides, we talk about the mass shooting, we talk about police shootings, the truth of the matter is, the other side of the coin is, most gun violence, gun-related injuries are actually suicides. And the number one person to commit a gun-related suicide is actually a white male. So everybody's impacted. This is not a freebie or a free pass for anyone. Yes. And so we need to, again, as doctors, as we talk, we need to talk responsibly about everything in order to really get to the crux of this issue.
Absolutely. And I like the fact that you brought up gun safety. I'm going to show you a few clips about when we went to the gun range, and Lee kind of touched on gun safety and so forth, because we always talk about homicides and mass shootings, but we forget about accidental deaths. We forget about people who are killed. There was a statistic that showed that several children, let's see here, I think we have it here backstage. Every day, 8 children and teens are shot unintentionally by family fire. Okay. So it's not only about mental illness and all the things that you mentioned and stamping out evil. Sometimes it's just about gun safety. And so let's just take a few minutes to look at our trip to the gun range. Some of us knew what we were doing and others were learning a lot. We'll see you in a few moments. Check us out.
You are responsible for checking that firearm. If I go, these guys don't have any ammo back there.
Okay.
If he hands me a firearm, before he hands me that firearm, he's responsible for checking that firearm to make sure that it's not loaded.
Oh, I see. Okay.
The minute I get that firearm in my hand, I'm responsible for checking that firearm is not loaded.
So I have to check it again. In other words, he checks it and hands it to you. Yes. Then you're responsible to check it again.
Exactly.
Got it.
I don't care if you visually seen him check that firearm and it didn't have any rounds.
Mm-hmm.
The minute he hands it to you, you're responsible for that firearm.
Okay.
You're responsible for making sure that it's clear.
Mm-hmm.
And once it's loaded, it has to be in a safe manner.
Got it.
Okay? Any questions for me right now that you can think of?
Not so far. Not so far. Well, actually, I have a question. That's not true. I'm also thinking about buying a gun for my home.
Okay.
And I'm trying to think of what makes the most sense for somebody like me, who's more of a novice, who is a novice, and then also who has children in the home.
Two things. Are you going to carry that firearm with you, or are you going to leave it at the house?
I'm going to leave it at the house.
Okay. I highly recommend a shotgun.
Okay.
Because it won't penetrate the wall.
Okay.
It's easy to shoot.
Okay.
And I could shoot that at that machine gun. If the perpetrator's next to the lamp or next to the couch, he's going to get some buckshot on him.
Okay. Is it shotguns? When I think of them in my head, I think of something pretty big. Is storing it in a home with small kids going to be an issue, you think?
Typically, a shotgun is longer, but there are locks that go over the trigger guard. So
Okay.
you'll be okay with that.
Okay.
I don't believe a firearm should be in a house without being locked.
Oh, of course. Of course. Of course.
Shoulder.
Okay.
Kind of pull back a little bit. You want a nice little hug in here.
Okay.
Chin here. Kind of squeeze, push forward, squeeze into your shoulder. And lean forward.
Okay.
And as fast as you pull the trigger, that's as fast as the firearm. So let's see you pull the fire.
All right, Miss Sonia. Dr. Sonia, don't shoot that.
So you ready? Let me put you on hot.
Well, I don't know. What am I standing like?
That's fine. Kind of lean forward into it.
Oh, shit. What you mean? Ooh, that thing went into my shoulder.
So the kickback is real.
Yes.
Okay. So, I put that in there just to underscore that we're not against guns. I personally don't like guns. I'm not going to lie. I'm not a big gun fan. I wish we lived in a world, in a society where we don't have to use them at all. I've personally seen the impact of guns on bodies, on families, and on communities and our nation as a whole. But provided we're being safe, provided you do have a Second Amendment right to own them, I think it's really important that we come up with common sense laws to make it safer. Yeah. There are several people that are advocating for red flag laws, which allow us to report if we feel that there is somebody who is a high risk for threatening or for, I should say, perpetrating some of these violent crimes. Some of the last shooters, if you talk to people who were online with them, they'll say they were telling us that they were violent. They were telling us that they wanted to shoot up things. So we have to come to common ground on this, and we have to come up with a solution that's going to help. But I want to switch gears a little bit because I want our viewers and our guest to see a very special fifth guest that we have. We did an interview with a mother who lost her son to gun violence. And I think it's important for us to put a face on this. We're often talking about it and talking about how people feel. Well, let's actually talk to somebody who's been through it. And we're just going to show you little clips of it. And I want our guests and viewers to comment on what they think. We have all of the crew here for a special interview with a mother who has been a victim of gun violence. I don't want to delay too long because I really want to bring on our next guest, and she has a very powerful story to share with us. A lot of times, like Sonia, you were saying, it's numb to us, but the people who are actually experiencing it, it's not something that's numbing to them. There's often not enough numbing for the pain that they feel. Without further ado, I want to tell you a little bit about our next guest. So we have Ms. Cheryl A. Heggie Lumpkins. She describes herself as a very strong woman in all that she does, who is very spiritual and loves serving the Lord. A proud mother of 3 children and 8 grandchildren, she met tragedy in 2011 when she lost her 17-year-old son to gun violence. Ms. Cheryl loves being around family and friends and her coworkers. She enjoys attending church and working in the church. Additionally, she's always worked in healthcare since 1977 and has been an essential worker on the front lines throughout the pandemic. She enjoys reading her Bible, traveling, and fishing. Most notably, she enjoys giving back to the community, feeding the homeless, and supporting other victims of gun violence. When she lived in Kansas City, Missouri, she would often give advice to others and share her life journey. She tells us at When Docs Talk that she wanted to be a part of this show in order to express her views on gun violence and to reach out to other families of victims, offering different kinds of support. We are so honored to have her here with us today. Please welcome Ms. Cheryl Heggie Lumpkins.
Hello, everyone.
Hey, Ms.
Hello,
Cheryl.
Miss Cheryl.
How are you doing today?
I am doing beautiful.
Great. Well, we are so excited to have you, so happy to have you. Happy to be able to put a face on what we're discussing and to just learn from you and learn what your journey has been like.
Mm-hmm. It's been a journey.
I'm sure it has. I'm sure it has. If you don't mind, I just want to start out by asking a little bit about Ricky.
Well, Ricky, we call him Little Ricky, and he's the junior. He was very happy, peaceful, no nonsense guy, outgoing, loved his family, his friends, his siblings, very involved in our church at Mount Sinai Missionary Baptist Church in Kansas City, worked with the youth. He was just a very good, energetic young man. He had so much going for him, and his life was cut so short. He really honored his grandparents. My mother, he helped take care of her in her older age. He would go in the community, in the neighborhood. We have elderly people on my mother's block. He would cut the grass, shovel the snow. You know, he was just a good young man and had a future promising to him before, someone took his life.
Well, it sounds like he was a really remarkable young man. And I'm gonna just ask you, what happened?
Well, November the 19th, 2011, we was at the church, my mother, my church family, and friends. This particular day, we was giving out Thanksgiving baskets, feeding the homeless. He was up there assisting like he always had, and he had been with us all day. And that evening, he wanted to go attend a play at a high school with a couple of his friends, which I knew. So they went to the play. They stopped at McDonald's. They stopped at the park on 53rd in Brooklyn called Blue Hills Park to eat their food. So what happened in that neighborhood, it was a gang initiation for someone to kill somebody 5 blocks from our home, from me and his father's home. And an individual came up, I know his name, shot up the car. 2 other passengers got injured. Ricky was driving. He got shot 7 times. He pulled off, and the hospital, Research Hospital, is probably 5 blocks away. He was trying to get to the hospital. So he collided into a fire hydrant where, they pronounced him dead.
Yeah. So, he was 17 years old when that happened. And Miss Cheryl went on to explain the immediate impact, how she felt and what happened next. Miss Cheryl, tell me about that call.
The call was the detectives that came to our house, me and Big Ricky's house, his father, and we was asleep. So they called my youngest brother, Michael, and he had called us and said little Ricky had got killed. And so by the time we got the call, the detectives, was knocking back at the door, and I was in shock. I remember his dad passed out. I called my mother, I called my brother, I called his sister. I was in shock because I had been with him all day. And I never thought anything like that would happen to my child.
Mm-hmm.
And it was devastating. I thought I was going to lose my mind. I should have lost my mind, but it was by God's grace that, he sustained me.
So nobody has ever been held responsible?
No.
Wow. How does that make you feel?
I was very angry, just knowing that an individual, just because you want to be in a gang, come up and take an innocent person's life, like in the Bible says, "Thou shalt not kill."
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You're gonna answer.
Yes.
You're gonna answer to to God. And I had a lot of mixed emotions, feelings, mad, depressed, angry. I even wanted to do something to that individual.
Mm-hmm.
I can understand that. I can understand
Absolutely.
that.
Mm-hmm.
Can totally understand that.
Absolutely.
Dr. A, weigh in on that for us a little bit, because she talks about all the emotions she felt as a survivor of this trauma, including anger, including a desire to even harm somebody. In your practice, in your counseling, what kind of emotions do you see running through your patients who are either themselves victims and survivors of this, or maybe family members? I think you're on mute.
Can you hear me now?
A little bit better. Let's see here if we can get you in center. Okay, try again.
Can you hear me now?
Better.
Okay. So people respond to trauma in so many different ways. But our bodies are supposed to are made in a way that we do respond to stress. We do respond to danger, and we all know about the fight or flight mechanism that we have. The problem is when you deal with trauma, your body stays stuck, your mind stays stuck in that response system. So even when you're not, there's not an active threat, your mind responds as if there is an active threat. And so everything that she's going through is normal. That's what you're supposed to do when you deal with trauma. What we try to do is say, now that your body is responding in this way, what are some ways that we can mitigate that damage? What are some things that we can do? What are things that are put in place to help you get past this trauma so that you can have the kind of life that you should have, and I think there's no word in the English language for someone who loses a child.
Mm-mm.
You have a widow, you have a widower, you have an orphan. But when you lose a child, there's no word for that. We're not. That's against the normal order of things. So a lot of things people don't know how to deal with it.
Yes.
We don't know how to grieve well. We don't know the process of grieving, and we don't know how to get our minds to a place that we can react from a safe space.
Mm-hmm.
So our job as a society is, if we're talking about guns and we're talking about violence and trauma, there's a difference between preventable trauma and trauma that I can't do anything about. To me, gun violence is the kind of trauma that we can do something about, and we should be doing something about.
Absolutely.
Not just from a physical, how do we deal with the bodies only, but like you guys are talking about, how do we put things in place to help them mentally cope? How do we know that it's not just the people dealing directly with the trauma, but even those of us hearing about it, it has an impact on us. It affects us in some way, and we can't pretend like it doesn't. We have
Absolutely. I agree 100%. It affects us. In fact, she talks a little bit more about it. I want you guys to see.
Yeah, what do we do as a community to even have that discussion, moving forward?
Well, I believe that first we need to show love and unity toward each other. We have lost that in society.
Yeah.
There is support groups. That's what brought me through in Kansas City. I attended Ad Hoc Against Crime. We went out and did visuals and supported other homicide victims, families, and friends. Kansas City Police Department, KC Nova, and also the Mothers in Charge. Now, the Mothers in Charge is a group, it's a charter group nationwide. It's not one here in Atlanta, but these mothers travel all around the world supporting homicide victims, give coping skills. Like in Atlanta, they have crime victims come. They do have support groups here, but I haven't, reached out to them. But if it wasn't for these support groups to get me through, I would probably been crazy. Because you have to learn how you can relate with people that has went through this.
Yes.
You have to have the support. I used to get so mad at people when they say, I know how you feel. No, you don't.
No.
You don't know how it feels to lose a child. And
in that way, that horrible way.
It was such a tragic for me. It was sudden. It was just sudden. I was in shock. My whole family and friends. I mean, you take a genuine person like that had so much going for him. He was a no-nonsense guy. Didn't start no trouble. He didn't like to be around trouble. He was jolly. He told jokes, and had the most beautiful smile.
He sure did. We have a picture of him. Why don't our backstage help us to put a picture of little Ricky so we can see? There he is. Handsome young man. I believe when we spoke, and correct me if I'm wrong, Ms. Cheryl, you said that picture on the lower right-hand side in the middle he was on his way to prom there?
Yes, he took that picture October 2011.
Oh, wow.
A month before he passed, and the other one is off of his obituary. I found out that when I was seeing Dr. John Lane, he's a grievance psychiatrist. He told me, he said, Miss Cheryl, you ain't going to be right for 5 years. And sure enough, it took every bit of the 5 years for me to learn how to deal and live with it. Yeah, I still go through them five grievance stages, but I know how to deal with it. I would find myself going to the cemetery every day, bust out crying. I couldn't hold a job for a year and a half.
Yeah, well,
I couldn't. I just couldn't. Went back to heavy drinking. Never ever smoked a cigarette until that boy got killed.
Wow.
Never. But
so she kind of takes you through the grieving process, much of which you talked about, Dr. A. I want to show you all one last clip and then have our guests weigh in, because I think that I hear a lot of times with victims like this, victims, family members, they often say that they're re-traumatized by the fact that, one, there's no justice, and two, there's no change. And so we asked Ms. Cheryl, what life has been like and if she thinks there's been any sort of progress since her son was shot.
Mhm.
My next question to you, though, is do you feel that in the, I guess at this point, 11 years that have passed, do you feel like there's been any progression in gun safety?
No.
No.
At the time when Ricky passed, it was gun violence, but it has progressed so much over the years. I remember when he passed, that year and the following year in Kansas City, it had really increased. And my daughter just kept begging me, please come down here with me. Because my spirit, I felt something was going to happen in my spirit, you know. But today, it's out of control. I mean, come on now. Wake up, people. It's just out of control.
It is out of control. Thoughts?
I think that her personal experience definitely.
I'm sorry, Davida, I can't really hear you. Can you speak up a little bit louder?
Oh, I was telling you that I just think that Michelle's experience really does make you feel like, one, because I already know Michelle, I didn't know that she had that experience with her son, and to see that this is something that for somebody that I see on a daily basis at work, what she went through, how she struggled, and how it's so, you know, how, like, a lot of times you don't really feel like something is really personal until it's affecting you. And now that I can see somebody that I love, how it affected them, it's just, it's different.
Yeah, it is. I wanted to show you some of our viewers because we asked how many people had ever had somebody die, somebody close to them die as a result of guns. And although fortunately of our surveyed people, 61% said no, almost 40% of that crew had somebody close to them who died. We also asked the question about whether they had personally been injured, and there was close to 30 something percent said they were too. So I think you're right, Davida. It really hits home when it's either you or somebody that you know. And the thing that I fear, if I want to be honest with all of you, is that it's beginning to seem like it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when.
Yeah.
I feel like the way things are going, it's only a matter of time before you know somebody personally impacted by gun violence, somebody who's shot. I already do personally know, but it puts you in a perpetual state of kind of stress, if you will, like Dr. A was mentioning. I want to throw a question to our healthcare professionals here, because this is what we often see, and I want you to comment on this. So back in 2018, there was a tweet by the NRA, the National Rifle Association, saying that someone should tell self-important anti-gun doctors to stay in their lane. They were basically commenting that a lot of the studies that were anti-gun that were being perpetrated, or I should say put out by the doctors, were not really indicated. This is not really our lane. And so I'm going to throw it over. I'll throw it over to Dr. Danner. Let's bring you over to the center. Is this your lane, Dr. Danner?
I think, absolutely, it is, my lane, just like, everybody else on here. I have a young son, he's 12. I have a daughter that's 20. And, when someone's child come in injured, or an adult, these are people's family members, their wives, their husbands, their sons, their daughters, their nieces, nephews, friends, their siblings. And the thing is, it doesn't matter what that relationship is, it hurts. It's a very painful thing. And particularly like you, me, David, I'm not sure if anybody else is in this emergency room where we're kind of the first ones to encounter when EMS brings them in. The EMS guys are impacted. Take them up to the operating room. They're impacted. Take them to the floor in the ICU. And so basically when somebody gets shot, a lot of people get pulled into it. And the aftermath, takes up a lot of resources, emotional, but also physical, financial, and in the emotional toll on the families is untold. The emotional toll on the patient is untold. And there's a book, I think, article by Dr. Widow, or maybe it's in a book. It said, "Hurt people hurt people." The most likely person to commit an actual violent offense is someone who's been previously injured.
That's right.
And so when you don't deal with it, when you don't basically prevent that next event, the thing is you're setting up the next event. So there's old adage, a lot of us know it, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And there are prevention advocates out there. I told my friend Dr. McGee in Gary, Indiana, I mentioned it because we have this initiative with the 100 Black Men of America called, he started in Chicago with the 100 Black Men of Chicago, Mask On, Violence Out, Off, and basically a violence out, but basically an active effort to stomp out violence, giving the kids alternatives, education, behavior coaching, and then teaching them to be responsible, that they are important contributors to our society. The reason this is so important, and you see the faces on here, is because when you look at those people come in through Grady all the time, 9 out of 10 times they're African American, and 8 out of 10 times they're African American males. And when you look at the number of people who are basically injured from homicides, 24 out of 100,000 are Black males versus 4, maybe 5 at the highest, some other race or nationality. It's a 6-fold increase in that group. When you look at these mass shootings, there are certain profiles and demographics. When you look at suicides, like I said, there are certain demographics. So as we were talking about safety, when people come to pediatric offices or into the emergency room and primary care, these opportunities to discuss this, and sometimes we lose that opportunity to pick up on something that they're going through something. They may be even open enough. They tell us some things that they may not tell anybody else. And then you say, don't talk to them about it. That's a money-driven thing. If we take that advice, then I think that we have something we have to answer to ourselves if we don't become responsible as healthcare providers, as healthcare professionals.
Absolutely. I'm so glad you touched on that, because there have been initiatives to silence us when it comes to discussing guns and safety with our patients. In fact, one pediatrician said she was threatened and told that she is not allowed to ask about guns in the home. We did ask our surveillance, our viewers, should gun safety be discussed during pediatric or primary care medical visits? And the vast majority of our patients, and I should say our surveys, say yes. So that means our patients do want to talk about guns with us, gun safety. They do think it's appropriate for your doctor to ask, do you have guns in the home? Are they safe? So I agree with you, Dr. Danner. We need to take it upon ourselves to do just that, because it's only ourselves we'll have to answer to if we allow people to tell us what and what is not our lane, when we're all part of the society and we see these things firsthand.
Exactly.
You talk about the different people in the hospital that touch the patient or that are involved in a mass casualty, or even just a casualty of one. I spoke to somebody who worked in environmental services, who cleans the rooms. And she talked about the trauma that she felt when she saw all the blood everywhere. Yeah. That she had that in her nightmares. The sheets drenched with blood, the floor drenched with blood.
Yeah. I was gonna say that the biggest threat is silencing us. That's the biggest. We have to have conversations, and so whether that is those of you in medical health or those of us in mental health, we have a response. We're the ones walking alongside the hurting and the wounded in some way. And definitely, if somebody says this is not our lane, I would say we are the first people in that lane. We belong in that lane. We have to talk.
Absolutely.
Some of your patients, my clients, they don't have a voice. So if I'm not the voice, then they're left on the wayside. They're hurting. I'm the one that they feel safe with, that they can have the conversation with. I have a responsibility.
That's right. Sorry, go ahead.
I have a comment to spin off what Dr. Banner stated earlier, is that why are we as a society waiting on our senator and Congress to pass these bills into law? There are things that we could do as an individual. For instance, if you have a kid that's under 18 years old in your residence, why not buy a lockbox? there's so many safes out there that's biometric that you can just place your fingerprint on. Some of them you could open up with your phone from a Bluetooth standpoint. So to the viewing audience, please do not wait till a law-abiding individual not help you protect your own family.
Right.
Get the training. Multiple gun stores will have Saturday training, evening training. So bottom line, we all say, oh, we're going to protect our kids. But why are you not protecting your kids in the household? And not only your kids, the visitors. Your kids have friends. You may educate your kid about not touching it. Trust me, they will if they have access to it. But I can't stress enough that training, education, education, education. And it will make a difference.
100%. So per that, I just want to tell you what our viewers said. Do they feel that they're more safe with guns? More access to guns make people feel safer. Most people did not feel that. I know it's always the narrative, oh, protect yourself. Some people feel comfortable protecting themselves, and others do not think that having more guns around makes them feel safer. But if you are going to protect yourself, just like you said, Lee, you got to protect the guns, your children, the people around you. You got to know what you're doing. And I think those are the kind of things that we should be pushing for in terms of laws, at least if we're going to have gun owners, because that is part of our rights under the Second Amendment. At least let's make people accountable, make sure they have the training, make sure they're storing them safely. And in some states, they're talking about making parents accountable when there is a gun-related injury or death. Mass shootings included, like the case in Oxnard, Michigan, I believe. I think they're trying to hold the parents responsible. So these are things to consider. I want to thank all of our guests, and I want our guests to just leave just a few words with our viewers. Last minute statements. Lee, you've told us, you want to keep people being safe and responsible about guns. Any last words for our viewers?
Yes, you as a gun owner, well, I'll say with two comments. Basically, I see it all the time, women buying firearms for their boyfriends. These firearms are ending up in upstate New York. You could purchase a firearm here in Georgia for $400, and in New York and upstate, that firearm is $1,200. Do not purchase a firearm for another individual, because you will no longer date him, and that firearm will end up at a crime scene, and you will go to jail. The other point, too, I have is you are responsible if you pull a trigger. You are responsible for wherever that projectile lands. So I say that to say, if my life is being threatened and I shoot an individual, guess what? I may kill that individual, but if it goes through that individual's body or I miss and hit an old lady passing by, guess what? I'll be clear for shooting that individual, but I won't be clear for shooting the passerby. So I can't stress enough, practice with your firearm. Don't just purchase it, go shoot it one time and you think you have it. It's a big responsibility. And I appreciate my viewing audience, and I hope you guys, if I could save one life, I think I did my job. Thanks for having me, guys.
So much, Lee. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. John, what do you have to leave with our viewers?
Well, I'm going to kind of piggyback. There's a question that was just flashed across the screen. Should gun owners talk with people in their homes about guns? And I think it goes back to what Lee is saying is, again, education first, education on safety, education on, I think that people need to understand the laws, even the laws on assault rifles, and understanding the difference. Like somebody asked earlier about what is an AK-47, which is an automatic assault rifle, versus an AR-15, which is a semi-automatic rifle. And the thing is, these laws and then this understanding of guns, as Lee said earlier, guns technically are used, they assist in killing, but really it's people that kill people. There's not just mental health issues. There are issues that we didn't touch on that I think if one of my other friends was on, he'd talk about poverty and the joblessness and the hopelessness and things like that, that we have to look at ourselves as a society and make sure that people are getting what they need, whether it's mental health counseling and therapy, whether it's adequate jobs, whether it's adequate education and support. And I think that it's important that doctors talk, because we need to bring these subjects up to the forefront and have active discussion with our politicians, with our lawmakers, with our police. And we need to basically be proactive in this because children are dying, innocent kids like in Uvalde, adults are dying. Look what happened in Buffalo. We got issues in Michigan. We have issues in Memphis. We have issues in Atlanta and throughout the country. And in the United States, it happens at a higher rate than anywhere else in the world. So we can't just blow it off. And basically, as Martin Luther King once said, when we become silent about things that matter, that's when we begin to die. It's time for us to have a greater voice and engaging with our congressmen and helping them and assisting, not fighting them and trying to demonize them, with our senators, with our representatives, with our judges. And we need to come together as a responsible community and a responsible nation and keep doing what you guys are doing at When Docs Talk. This is a wonderful show. I applaud you for your efforts and commend every panelist, Lee, Miss Tashawn, and Miss Cheryl. My heart goes out. I tell my own personal story real quickly, only that, my natural father actually got killed when I was a baby, died. So never really knew him. And one of my young friends who was like a little brother to me, one of the other kids we grew up basically shot him down on the basketball court. We grew up playing basketball when we were in medical school. One of the darkest days in all my medical education was that day when my friend Greg died with a gunshot wound for senseless argument over a basketball game. This is real.
It's real. I'm so sorry to hear that. And I really appreciate your being on the show and all of what you said to our viewers. We appreciate your feedback and your comments. How about ADA Tyshawn Jackson? Last minute words for our viewers?
Absolutely. And I do want to piggyback off of Dr. Danner by saying thank you all. This was a very important discussion, so thank you for having it. Thank you for bringing it to the forefront. This is things that we do need for our community to hear. I want to say, let's keep it real. Let's keep it responsible, educated, and lawful. As Sergeant Danner said, children are dying. I'm sorry, Sergeant Danner. There's a sergeant in the police department named Sergeant Danner. And I'm always talking to him, so I'm sorry, Dr. Danner, but I guess Sergeant Danner's always on my mind. But children are dying at alarming rates. Children are dying at homicides and suicides. And the statistics show that 41% of the kids between the age of 10 to 17 that are dying by suicide die by a gun in the home. And the homeowner felt that they did not think that their children could access the firearms. Right? There are homicides rates are rising every year. And majority of our homicides come from those whose firearm was stolen either out of their car or out of their home. So long story short, we want our responsible, educated, and lawful gun owners to do a couple of things. Be responsible. Store your firearm in a practical place where it's not easily accessible. Be educated on what you have in your home. This firearm is a deadly weapon, and you need to be well versed in what you have in your possession. Be lawful. Continue to carry your firearm according to the laws of the state and store your firearms. I cannot tell you, within the past 3 months, I have on my desk right now 3 murders where there were children killing themselves or a 4-year-old killing her 4-year-old twin because a firearm was laying in the home on the floor as the firearm owner went to sleep, and this 4-year-old got a hold of that gun and shot her 4-year-old twin. And of course, she had no idea what she was doing, but that firearm wasn't stored. So we just want everyone to keep it real, keep it safe. Again, everyone has a constitutional right to carry. We recognize that. But if we can have those firearms stored, I guarantee you the unlawful thefts that happen where they get firearms, those firearms cannot get in the hand of those who are unlawfully committing these crimes. And therefore, the statistics show that the homicide rate will decrease if lawful gun owners be responsible with their firearms.
Thank you so much, ADA Tyshawn. I really appreciate that. We do need to be safer. It's not about taking guns away from people when we have these discussions. It's not about being anti-gun. It's being about pro-safety.
Absolutely.
And so we appreciate you being here. And I thank you so much for your comments, your words, and your insight. And I want to bring on Dr. A to leave some last minute words with our viewers before our host let our viewers know their last minute words, because we have some support groups we want you guys to know about too.
Well, I just want to, I guess, direct it first of all to someone out there who's hurting, someone out there who is dealing with the impact and has been impacted in some way by gun violence. You're not alone. You're not alone in your pain. You're not alone in your hurt. Your voice deserves to be heard. You don't have to go through everything you're going through on your own. I'm glad that you talked about support groups. There are people out there that want to help you, to walk alongside you, to help you process everything that you're going through. We do a good job of as people, of not resolving our issues. We bury it and we just want to be strong and keep going. But my final words would be, just like normalize going to the doctor when you're physically hurting. Let us normalize going to talk to a mental health counselor when you feel stuck. It's not because you have a psychotic disorder. It is not because you have a diagnosis. It's because life is hard and you're trying to navigate life and you've been exposed to trauma. The body doesn't know how to handle sustained trauma or perceived threat. You don't have to deal with this on your own. There are people out there that want to walk alongside you and you need them. So lean into that. I want to thank you, ladies. I think this is an amazing conversation that we're having. I love the fact that we're not just having one conversation, but there's a series of conversations. People need a safe space, a place where they feel like they will be heard, they will be empathized with, they will be understood, and they will be given resources. That's what When Ducks Talk has become to so many people. So it's been an honor to be part of this conversation. I want our people to know that this is just the beginning of conversations. By not being silent, by refusing to be silenced, whether by the community or even by ourselves, we can make the change that we desire to see. And our children, the next generation, they need us to speak up for them. They need us to model for them what dealing with trauma in a positive way looks like. So thank you for having me.
We really thank you for joining us. I take to heart everything you've said. Thank you for being that champion for our mental wellness, not just for those who are victimized, but for us as a nation, because we are all victimized in some sense by what's going on and our inability to get a handle on this. So Dr. A, we really thank you. And we appreciate you being a guest on our show today. All right, everyone. We have our daily prescriptions. We're going to end the show out, but we want to just leave a few important details with you, with our host. So if I can invite our host back to the screen. I want you all, before we leave, I want you all to know about a few things, because several of our viewers have been asking us, what can we do besides cry and pray and give thoughts? What can we do? There are a lot of resources for action and support. There is a group called Every Town for Gun Safety. You can find a chapter in almost every state. And if you go to their website, and we're going to also have this on our When Docs Talk website, you can find different community actions that you can take. If you don't have the time, you can donate. If you have more time, you can join in their different initiatives. There's Moms Demand Action. That is another group. There's a subsidiary of that is Students Demand Action. So they talk about how during the 80s, I believe, Mothers Against Drunk Driving and then subsequently Students Against Drunk Driving made an impact on things like driving drunk. There was a time when it was normalized in our culture to drink and drive. And people said, well, people are going to drink anyway. Same vein with guns. Yes, there may be guns anyway, but it doesn't mean we have to sit back silently. So check out Moms Demand Action. Sandy Hook's Promise is another organization started by some of the victims and families of the Sandy Hook's survivors and victims, I should say. And there are different initiatives on their page, literal tangible things that they will tell you can do to be a part of this fight. The Brady campaign to prevent gun violence, something called Gun Free Kids, and the Coalition to Stop Violence. There are things out there. We don't have to feel helpless. Another thing I want you all to be aware of is that June is Gun Violence Awareness Month. June 3rd through 5th, we're encouraging people to show support of gun violence survivors and victims. So wear orange. Write your senators and your lawmakers. Tell them you want common sense legislation and don't be silenced and don't be told, well, it's all these other things that are causing it. Let them know you want things like red flag laws enacted and background checks that are standardized, because there are some, but they're a little more lax in certain areas and states. Shouldn't be easy to get a gun without you getting screened to make sure that you are properly going to use that gun and not use it for mass destruction. Donate if you have the opportunity to. Volunteer. There are ways to be involved. Don't feel like you are hopeless. There are so many excuses out there besides guns, right? They say, oh, it's the video games, it's social media, it's broken families, single mothers, drugs, poverty. Yes, there are so many things that may impact what's going on with mass shootings. But in the end, the truth is, the more guns, the more we're seeing this. And so we have to do something about it. If it's not restricting guns, at least making sure they're in the right hands. And when they are in the hands of law-abiding citizens, making sure that they're safe. Ladies, what are your final thoughts for our viewers before we close?
I know we talked a lot about gun violence, and I do want to just remind people that, yes, you know, in light of everything that's been happening, the mass shootings recently, that's something that we are focusing on, and it's a very tangible threat. However, I do want to just highlight that the gun safety is also something that people should be more cognizant of. Just as we discussed that, I don't want that to be lost, because like Lee stressed, like, yes, you can be a lawful gun owner, but a lot of things can happen are taken into consideration when having that gun in your home.
Absolutely, Davida. Weigh in for us, Dr. P.
Well, you know, I believe, well, I own guns. And I mean, I guess, you know, I remember, you know, when I left home, because my grandfather had a gun, you know, he used it for hunting, but he also had a 45 in his truck for protection. And so that was something just ingrained in us and our family that you know, if you needed something to protect yourself. And I know for me, I was really hesitant about getting a gun when I was single. I left home, moved out on my own, was driving across country. And I was like, I don't want to get a gun because I don't know how to use it. And then what if I hurt myself or somebody else? And so, but then I, you know, recognized for me, I was like, wait a minute, all these other people have guns, you know, and what are they doing with the guns? And how am I going to best protect myself against a gun is with a gun. But, you know, from that standpoint, I made sure that, you know, I'm proficient with it. I know how to use it. I'm comfortable with it. But also, you know, all I can account for is me. I can't account for all those other people that use guns, own guns. But I think, you know, when Ms. Cheryl was talking about community, really, that's where the discussion really needs to be, from the standpoint of us as people and having relationships with one another. And within those relationships, being able to have conflict resolution, figuring out other ways to deal with things besides having to shoot someone if you're out of anger or a fight, or from the standpoint of kids that feel like the only way that they're going to have somebody to have their back is to join a gang, and they have to do something like they did to, you know, Miss Cheryl's son. I mean, all of these different things, you know, it definitely, there's a lot of layers. It's very complicated, but then again, it could be simple from the standpoint of us just trying to be human, humanizing one another, and being able to talk to one another, and just starting there.
I love it. I love it. One of the Sandy Hook's promise, if you go to their website, one of their initiatives is start with saying hello.
Yeah.
It's a simple initiative that they try and encourage in schools, like talk to people, say hi, see where people are. So I love that, Sonia. Dr. Yuli, what do you got from viewers?
I'm gonna try to shorten everything that's running through my head, but the sense of community that we had when we were growing up is gone, and we need to revive that. It costs no money to smile. It costs no money to say hi. it costs no money to just be human. You never know whose day you're going to brighten or whose mind you're going to change from doing something catastrophic just by being nice. That's the first thing. The second thing is, we haven't mentioned it, but I'm going to say a bad word, the filibuster that is going on in the Senate. 10 people, if you want to get real specific, probably about 50, but 10 people need to get on board with actually passing some kind of sensible gun reform that's going to make sense. HR 8 is not it. It needs to be changed some more. And I feel like those who are in the position that can make an acute change aren't doing it. That needs to happen. And I'm a gun owner myself. I have children in the house and everything is locked up. Good luck trying to get it. Please keep your family safe, not just by owning a gun, but being safe and educated about your weapon.
Right.
Absolutely. Well, I want to just end with a poem from a mother in the group Physician Mom Demands Action. Dr. Tracy Levitt describes herself as an enraged mother of 3. And she says, belly round like an apple, shiny and tight, inside hopes and dreams, our future light. Giggles and grins, 10 wiggling toes, playing and crawling, imagination grows. Joy and tears, a life so full, 5 years old, now off to school. Nurturing teachers like a new home, music, library, science, classrooms to freely roam. Neurons firing, learning so much, friendships growing, warmth and deep human touch. Bellies fill, sweet lunchtime rollick, monkey bars, Foursquare, an outdoor frolic. Immersed in a lesson, eyes open wide, focused, expanding, unaware what's inside. A grown child of trauma, burdened with range, semi-automatic, loaded on a rampage. What happens next? Impossible to describe. Our minds can't go there. Tiny bodies, white chalk circumscribes. Breath and compressions, doctors relentlessly try. Hard to call, time of death, not ready for goodbye. Adults, be strong. Force your minds into this space. These are our babies being shot in the face. Now leave your shock, gather your fight, reset our world. Their futures must shine bright. Don't stop till it ends. Part of our future gone. Honor their memory, someone's daughter, someone's son. Thoughts and prayers, send money, write letters. It's just not enough. Stop collectively failing. Policy must change. There's no other way. Look in their eyes. Now take action each day. Until all children are free, no more hiding neath desk, no more terror, no more blood from precious young flesh. I am also an enraged mother. I am also a woman, a doctor, a mother, a daughter, a wife. It has to stop. We can do better. Don't let people convince you that there's nothing we can do but talk and thoughts and prayers. No more silence. Let's do something about it. Go to our website at When Docs Talk. We're on Facebook. We're on YouTube. We'll have resources that you can be a part of this fight for normal lives, for us, for our children. I want to thank you all for watching. We appreciate you. Catch us. We'll be on Sundays at 9. That's our new time. Thank you for watching When Docs Talk, and we will see you again next time. Be safe.
When dogs talk, when dogs talk, when dogs talk, when dogs talk. When dogs talk, when dogs talk.